Look, this morning's presentation is on the legal obligations of a building contractor, basically. So we're looking at what needs to be done in order for you to operate as a builder and continue to operate as a builder. So your legal obligations. Okay, so it's an overview of your legal obligations. So all right, the first thing we need to do is to register a business. Now, this really depends on the nature of your situation. So everyone's going to be different. Some people will register a business as a sole trader, in other words, using their own name and just operate that way. Others will have a preference to run it as a company. So it will be a proprietary limited company. And others may require it as a partnership where they have 2 to 20 people can be in a partnership. Now, the preference or the way the structure of your business really depends on your circumstances. It's something that needs to be discussed with your accountant and your lawyer, your solicitor, to see what is the right structure for you. Okay, because everyone's situation is different. Your financial situation, your experience, your how you want to run the company. As I said, you may want to have a partner or 5 partners or 10 partners. So really it depends on your situation. But one thing's for certain, you need to set up a structure. Now, once you've done that, you obviously have to register your business as well. So it needs to be registered with an ACN, ABN. Okay. So this needs to be done. Now, often we get our accountant to do that, but there's no reason why you couldn't do it online if it's a very simple business that you're trying to set up. However, it's highly recommended that you set it up using an accountant who's going to take care of all your financial side. So we're covering those aspects and we're covering the legal requirements. Okay, the first thing we need to understand is if you are running a construction business, a building business in New South Wales, you have to comply with the law, and the law is coming to us from the Home Building Act 1989. So this is what we need to follow. Okay. Now, again, this is an act, it's a legal document that you can access online, and it's quite large, but it tells you everything that needs to be done in regards to construction. And the Home Building Regulation 2014, which is basically a part of that act, it's come from that act. And we have the Building and Construction Industry Improving Productivity Act 2016. So you see words such as act, regulation. What do they mean? Well, I've put down there in red, an act speaks about a new piece of law. Okay, so that's an act is something, it's a law that's been passed by the government, that is Parliament. Parliament, where they all get there and they shout at each other, right? They pass laws that we have to then follow. Now, the regulation shows you how that law is implemented, how to achieve that law, how we do what that law says. Okay, so the act sits on top, then the regulation sits below that, and underneath the regulation we actually have another thing called codes of practice. Codes of practice. Now, codes of practice simplify the regulations and the act. In other words, they make it easier for us to understand. The wording is not legal, it's not lawyer terms, right? It's simpler terms. And we can find these codes of practice online. If you go to Safe Work website, you will see all the codes of practices. There are many, many codes of practices. Okay, so a good example is if we look at the other act that we have to follow as builders is the WHS Act, New South Wales, 2011. Now, if you go to the Safe Work website, you will see all the codes of practices relating to that act, such as working in confined spaces, working at heights. And it'll explain to you what you have to do, like what the regulation says, but it's in simple terms, easy to understand English, okay? So that is what we're doing with distinction between acts, regulations, and the basic codes of practice. So very good idea to look at codes of practice because it tells you what you must do. Okay, what about licensing? Now, it's like a separate country, okay? It's like, you know, you have a different driver's license. If you get it in New South Wales, you get it in Victoria, you get it in Queensland, it's different, but it doesn't stop you from driving in those states. However, a builder's license, again, each state has its own way of achieving a builder's license. But you cannot use my New South Wales builder's license in Victoria. I need to get a Victorian license, or I need to get a Queensland license, or I need to get a South Australian license. Now, what does that mean? It means, okay, you don't have to go through the whole process of trying to do their courses, but what you need to do is to show them that you have a current or a valid New South Wales license, and then they'll ask for certain things. They'll ask for evidence and proof of qualifications. And then what they'll do is they'll ring up Fair Trading and say, does this person have a license? If they say yes, then they should issue you with one. However, of course, it comes with a fee. It comes with restrictions. I'll give you a very good example is when I had to do, years ago, I had to do some work in Canberra. Now, Canberra is it's not part of New South Wales, okay? It's a territory. It's different to New South Wales. Now, I had to do some work in Canberra. I needed my license to be recognized there, to get a Canberra license. I couldn't use my license. So in order to do that, I had to apply to the equivalent of New South Wales Fair Trading in Canberra, and they wanted to see my license from New South Wales. They wanted to see what qualifications I had. They wanted to see basically a few documents, and then I left it with them, and within, I think it was 2 weeks, I paid money and I got a license, okay, which lasted me for a year, but I didn't need to renew it, so I didn't renew it, okay? Now, also remember that the type of license may vary between states. In New South Wales, you have a license, which means you can build residential, you can build factories, you can build anything you want with that one license. In other states, they may have certain restrictions, and you can only get a license to do certain heights or certain types of construction. So every state is different, okay? Our state is very generous. It enables you to do anything and everything with your license. So, and in the red, you can see that in New South Wales, fair trading regulates licensing. That means they are the ones who issue the license. They are the ones who monitor. They are the ones who take it away. Okay, so we need to comply with fair trading's requirements to get the license. It's not just simply having done the courses, the qualifications, such as what we offer here at Living Planet, where you do your Cert 4 and your diploma. And if you have 2 years experience, you are qualified as a builder, or you can get qualified as a builder. You need to make sure that the units, the subjects you do, everything complies with fair trading, okay? And that's what most institutions that offer courses will try to achieve. So we always have to keep an eye on what fair trading requirements are if you're applying for a license, because they may change over the years. Okay, so what are the legal responsibilities of a construction contractor? So the first thing, the most important thing that should be on every contractor's mind is safety. Why? Because if an accident happens, it can potentially ruin you, okay? Ruin your business, ruin your life. It can actually send you to jail if you are negligent and you allow a serious accident to happen because you didn't take proper care. So safety should be our first priority. All too often it's not. All too often we're worried too much about finishing the project on time, finishing at low cost, okay? So, but it should not be the case. The number one priority should be safety, okay, for your own protection. All right, so the construction contractor responsible for providing the material, the labor, the equipment, all the services to actually build the project, yeah, the building. That's the idea. The client engages us as a builder to give them a finished project. And we do that generally by hiring subcontractors to do most of the work. So each subcontractor will do a specific part of the work. We may have our own staff who undertake certain laboring tasks or certain carpentry tasks, okay? So understand that it's just a whole process that we are responsible for as the builder, the head contractor, and the client has given us his site. In actual fact, when we enter into a contract, the client gives us his site. We have responsibility for the site. The client cannot come and go as he pleases without our permission, okay? So the site becomes yours as a builder. Too often I hear of situations where, builders will complain to me that the client keeps coming to the site every day, every second day. Well, that is not allowed. If you look at the contracts, the contract will say that the client can only come a reasonable number of times with the builder's permission, okay? Too often the client wants to come and start looking and making changes, and they don't really understand all the time what needs to be done. So they slow your job down, they create issues for you. All right, so here are some of the responsibilities, more responsibilities of the contractor. Getting permits. Sometimes we are responsible to get different certification or permits. Let the contractors, subcontractors know that we are engaging them, securing the property, of course, making sure that the property is secure, fencing, because if somebody comes onto our site and there's an accident, we are responsible, especially if we haven't undertaken the proper safety measures. I've heard of situations where young children have come onto a building site, and in one case I remember distinctly, a child fell into a pier hole and drowned, okay? So it was the builder's responsibility. Why? Because he did not cover the pier hole. You cannot leave things exposed, dangerous things exposed, even though you have fencing around the site. Very important. And remember, you cannot use, I didn't know I had to do that. It's like driving a car. If you do something wrong, you can't say to the policeman that I didn't know, okay? They'll still say, you're driving, you have a license, you are responsible to know the laws. Same thing in building. You're building, you have a license, you are responsible to know what the laws are. And the laws do change. So it's up to you to maintain your currency, okay? So providing temporary facilities or utilities on site. This could mean things like site sheds, other facilities, first aid facilities, okay, lunchrooms. Depending on the site, we have different requirements. And to get all this information, we go back to the code, to the Act, okay? The Act will tell us what we need to provide. Okay, managing the people on site. Of course, that's our responsibility. Doing the surveying and then in the engineering, depending on your agreement with your client. Usually the client will provide the engineer, but often we have to control what's happening with the engineer. One that's getting a lot more importance these days is disposing or recycling of construction waste. Because of the push for a more environmentally friendly process, we have a lot more responsibility. Okay, we don't just throw all our rubbish in the waste. We recycle, we try and minimize the effect on the environment, and councils and other government departments are pushing for that. So we have to be conscious as builders. And very importantly is to monitor schedules and cash flows, because without that, your business can not operate properly or the way you want it to go. We have to look at how much money we're getting in this month, how much we're spending, what's left, okay? If we don't manage our schedule and our cash flow, we may not meet our scheduled time to finish, and we may not have enough money, balancing our money from month to month to pay our suppliers and subcontractors. So it's a critical part of the project, and usually the project manager is the one responsible for monitoring the schedules and cash flows with the assistance of his contract administrator and his site manager, okay? Maintaining accurate records. This is a legal responsibility that we have to maintain accurate records of all sorts. All records need to be accurate. Okay, so keeping legal documents and records and maintaining them. So it's essential that we take care of our tax obligations, our safety record, if there's any accidents on site. We need to keep proper records and with all aspects of our project, from our claims, our invoices, every piece of paper that comes through site, our drawings, keeping an accurate drawing, a register of drawings. Why? Because drawings get revised and we give those drawings to subcontractors, and we have to make sure that we're giving them the most current drawing. Otherwise, they will be pricing or building something that's a revision previously, right? So it's important to keep records, accurate records, to show, yes, we gave you this drawing on that day. We gave you revision C on such and such a date, or the client gave it to us on such and such a date. So we need to keep accurate records, whether it's via emails, letters. So every document on our site needs to be secure, current, and maintained, okay? So what the law requires, you must be able to explain all the transactions. In other words, explain, where did this money go? Where did you get this money? Okay, that's obvious. The law can ask us to explain these things. It should be in writing, so electronic or paper, and be in English or in a form that can be easily converted. So obviously, if you're maintaining records in another language, then to some extent, it needs to be easily converted to English. Okay, no ambiguity, so it's your obligation to do so. And most records need to be kept for a minimum of 5 years, but sometimes certain documents might be required to be kept longer. And always remember, if you don't keep proper records, tax records, you can incur penalties. All right, the next stage we look at is the industrial relations. And what is industrial relations? It's about the interaction between employer and employee, or these days we call it an employer, a PCBU, person conducting a business or undertaking, PCBU, and the employee is known as a worker. So we have PCBU and worker, or more traditionally, employer and employee. So what is the relationship? Now, there are, because of the fact that workers were very, very hard done by previously, they implemented organizations, acts to assist this relationship, to help workers. That was the main reason we had, organizations even such as unions were traditionally brought in to assist workers' rights, to make sure they get their rights. Nowadays, unions have obviously in many cases, not in all, but they surpass the protecting the worker, and they too often go to the other extreme and are making life difficult for the PCBU. But nevertheless, we have the Fair Work Act, which is an act again, so it's the law that's been passed down, which specifies the employee-employer relationship. It's there as a safety net for the employee, for the worker, to make sure that he doesn't get his rights. He's not abused. In other words, he's not working, 40 odd hours a week for the employee, when in actual fact, he should be legally entitled to say 38 hours a week is the maximum I'll work, unless I want to do overtime. Okay, so there are certain standards, minimum standards that must be maintained. And these are the national employment standards, which we'll have a better look at. There's a minimum set of standards that need to be maintained. And there's different awards. Awards can be agreements, okay? That's what an award is, basically an agreement. And you can have agreements between, for the whole industry, let's say, so for all laborers in the building industry may have an award. But you can also have awards or agreements that occur between the particular builder and his laborers. And this might happen on a site where it might be a difficult site, a more dangerous site, a site further away in the bush somewhere. And the agreement might be that the boss, or the employer, PCBU, says, you know what, on this job, even though you should be getting $24 an hour, I'm going to pay you $30 an hour on this job to all my laborers. Okay, so he can make an award, you can make an award, but it has to be better than the minimum standards, than what the Fair Work has set, Fair Work Award has set. In actual fact, there's over probably more than 120, 30, 40 awards. So each industry, each person has an award. Now, if you're going to make a separate award with your employees, it has to be better than what the original is. You cannot make one that's worse. I can't say to you, I'm going to pay you $5 an hour less than the award, and I'm going to work you harder. I can't say any of those two things, even though you might agree to it because you may not have work. All right, I cannot do that. And that's why the unions have the right. Not everybody's a member of the union, and you don't have to be a member of the union, but they have the right to come into a PCBU, to an employer, and say, I want to check your wage records. Even though members, the people may not be members of the union. They can come in and say, we want to check your wage records. Why? Because they have the ability then to say, okay, how much an hour are you paying this person? And if they are paying less than the award, then that PCBU will be fined, will be penalized, okay? So keep that in mind. Types of employment contracts we have basically falls down into three types: full-time, permanent, part-time, and casual, okay? So they're the three different distinctions, and I'm sure we're all aware of that. Okay, here are the minimum national employment standards, the 10 minimum entitlements. So there is a maximum number of weekly hours of work, and the worker has the right to ask for flexible working arrangements. Parental leave, so it's not just mothers these days, it's fathers can have parental leave. Annual leave, everyone's entitled to, every full-time worker is entitled to annual leave. Personal carers leave and compassionate leave. Community service leave. So if you're doing something for the community, like if you're in the SES or whatever they call them, to do assist the community, your employer has to give you that time off, okay? Long service leave, if you've been there for many, many years. Public holidays. And this is what, remember, every contract should refer to these to some extent, okay? Notice of termination and redundancy pay. So terminating, finishing the employment, what's the process? How much pay should you get? And the Fair Work Information Statement should be readily available to all your workers. Okay, so these are the minimum requirements for employees. Okay, the other thing that we have to consider, so we're a builder now and we're employing people, so you have all these responsibilities. If you are working by yourself, you don't have to consider any of this, right? But if you are employing other people, these are the things you must consider. Okay, so you have to be an equal opportunity employer. You cannot say, I'm not going to employ you because you are Chinese or you are, Australian or you are Lebanese or whatever you are. I cannot use that, okay? But if my job requires somebody to speak Mandarin, then I can advertise and say, I need a person who is fluent in Mandarin, right? But I can't say, I need a Chinese person, okay? Can't do that, okay? So be very careful the way you advertise for work, because it can be used against you. They can say you are equal opportunity employee. That's against the law, so you're going to be fined. Okay, so race, color, gender, we can't say, I just want to employ men or just want to employ women, okay? We can't discriminate against people's sexual preference. If they're bisexual, homosexual, multisexual, we cannot discriminate against them. Their age, you can't say, I'm not going to take you because you're too old, right? Or too young. We cannot discriminate against their physical or mental disability as long as they are capable of doing the job. This is the most important thing. We can't obviously take someone who has a mental disability or a physical disability if the work requires them to do physical work, okay? Single or married, can't discriminate. So all those items, I'm not going to go through them all, but they are there, okay? So ensure that you, as an employer, that you do not discriminate because of any of these things. Otherwise, you could be sued. Now, diversity in the workplace. It means having employees from a wide range of background. In fact, this is something that large companies are doing. They are doing this. They are looking at making sure that they have different types of people. I know this for a fact, that they will select people based on their diversity. In other words, your whatever you are, we need more of these people. We need more of them. We need to make our company diverse. We don't want to have white Anglo-Saxon people in our company, right? So we have to try and employ different people, okay? So that includes all these different things: ages, gender, ethnicity, physical ability, sexual orientation, religious belief, all those things, yeah? So we're trying to cater for all people. That's the idea, and that's what the law says, that you should be doing this. Oops. Okay. Now, another very important part is the procedures we have for employment termination and redundancy are explained and followed. Okay, so termination of employment, that happens one way or the other. Either the employer says, sorry, I can't use you anymore, or the employee says, sorry, boss, but I found a better paying job. Okay. But if an employer decides to terminate someone, they have to have reasons. We can't just say, you made a mistake, see you later. We have to give them warnings, okay, as an employer. We have to give them, by law, three warnings. And these must be in writing, they must be formalized, okay? And also give them a notice period as well. Now, unless, of course, we don't have the job, the work. Let's say COVID's come, we don't have work, well, then we can justify putting people off. Okay. And if the position is such that you've decided that you can't use this person anymore, there's not enough work anymore, you, instead of giving them their notice, which might be a minimum of two weeks, you can pay them instead. So if, let's say, I want to not get rid of, but terminate the employment of someone. If that person is not happy because I'm terminating his employment, in the 2 weeks that notice that I give him, he could actually do damage to my company. So instead of allowing him to possibly do damage to my company, I would say, here's your 2 weeks pay instead of notice. And that fixes that situation, okay? Okay, now we have what we call an ombudsman, and we have a Fair Work ombudsman. And the ombudsmen are there, they're like legal people who assist the public generally. And in this case, the Fair Work assists people in employment. Now, they are there to educate employers and employees about their rights and obligations, ensure compliance with the laws, and they can prosecute employers that don't do the right thing. So if you terminate your employee and he believes that you didn't do the right thing by him and you didn't like him because he had 2 nose rings, 3 earrings, 1 in his eye, okay, and you didn't like the way he looked and therefore you terminated him, he can go to the ombudsman and say, this is what happened, and then the ombudsman will get in touch with you and will say, you can't terminate him because of the way he looks, so please put him back on, otherwise you're going to be fined, we're going to come after you, okay? So unfair dismissal is one thing they deal with. And general protection, in other words, it's just generally not just because of unfair dismissal, but they look at other areas of dismissal for things that you shouldn't have dismissed someone, and things that aren't necessarily. See, employers try and find different ways of terminating people. They might say, well, we don't have enough work, but they do, and then after 2-3 weeks, they employ somebody else in that position, or they change the title or the role of the position. So they're aware of that situation. So there are a lot of cases where people go to specialized lawyers as well to take on the employer. So as an employer, we need to be very careful. As an employee, you have to be aware that if you're unfairly dismissed or you feel you have been unfairly dismissed, there are opportunities for you to go through the ombudsman or other legal processes. Okay, dispute resolution processes. So disputes are going to happen in the workplace often. Sometimes it's between individuals who work for you. Sometimes it's between you and an employee if you're an employer. So there are processes in place and to resolve this. Obviously, the best way is to get together, talk about the problem, try and resolve it, finish, negotiate the issue. Sometimes it requires mediation, where you bring in an independent mediator to try and resolve the issues. And then if that doesn't work, then there's an arbitration process where you go to court without it being as expensive as a proper court, but an arbitration, and then get it resolved that way. But I'm going to keep going because there's a fair bit to cover here, and I just want to make sure we finish. Okay, so the best practice in dispute resolution is make it quick. So try and resolve things quickly, be fair to all parties, don't seem to be favoring one or the other, and make sure we handle things fairly and sensitively. It's not made public knowledge, and be transparent. In other words, make sure that your decision is easily understood by all parties involved. Okay, so here's just a definition of the acts and the regulations, and which I've explained before. And the regulating agencies are the ones who basically they administer the law. They do what it takes, such as fair work, such as safe work. Okay, they are the ones who follow the laws and say you have to follow them now. You know, we know what the laws are, and we're put here by the government to make sure you are following these laws. Okay. Okay, Workers' Compensation Act is a very important act that we need to make sure that we as employees understand what that act says. Because if somebody gets injured in our workplace, we are responsible to make sure that they are rehabilitated, that payments are made to them from the Workers' Compensation Fund that we pay, insurance, and their medical expenses are paid for them. So we have to work together with the government authority to make sure that our employee is looked after. So it's very important that this insurance is taken out, and you can be fined for not having this insurance. And that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is if your employee hurts themselves to the extent that they can't ever work again, then you may have to sell your assets, your house, whatever you have, to pay for this person's lifetime of care if they become a quadriplegic. And these things happen. Believe me, they happen more often than not, that people get critically injured. They might die on a job. They might get incapacitated where they become what we call a vegetable, where they cannot move. So that person needs care for the rest of his life. And workers' compensation will take care of that if you have got that, okay? However, if you don't, you are then legally responsible. So you should not be operating any business without the proper workers' compensation insurance. Okay, so the rehabilitation process is a process of how you need to be as an employer. Okay, so when someone gets injured, they have to come back into your workplace. Like, I'll give you an example. I've had carpenters who've been injured in my workplace previously, and they can't do carpentry work. So brought him back, and he was doing just general work in the warehouse we had, just work that he could physically do. And that's something that is discussed between the doctors and you as an employer. So he might do light duties, normal duties under shorter working hours, alternative duties. So it really depends on the situation. Okay, taxation requirements. Obviously, every business has a taxation requirement, and we have certain things that we need to follow in construction as well. So we have to have everything another business needs, which is a tax file number, ABN. We have to pay GST. Obviously, if you're registered for GST, and every business that has a turnover over 75,000, I think, needs to be registered for GST. PAYG if you're paying employees. Fringe benefits tax if you've got benefits, so you're giving your employees computers, cars, and whatever else in lieu of income, a greater income. So all these things can be very complicated the bigger the business. So you need to have good accounting advice and follow that advice. Even if you're a small operator, I suggest and recommend that you have a good accountant to do your books, to do your work for you when it comes to taxation requirements. You have enough to focus on as running a building company. The more things you put on top of you, the more chance you're not going to be able to do all of it correct. Somewhere you're going to fail. Somewhere you will make a mistake or you will not comply. And the problem with government is they just penalize you. They don't say, oh, that's okay, just do it better next time, okay? They will hit you with penalties. So just be aware that better to get your accountant to handle these parts of your business. All right. So insurance, different insurance policies we need. Okay, so remember we have the statutory ones, the ones that are required by the different government levels, right? In Australia, we have federal government, state government, and local government, right? So, you know, we might have different requirements by each of those levels of government, but certainly there is insurance that's statutory, that it's part of legislation, such as the workers' compensation insurance. Okay, it's law, we have to have. So public liability is law. We have to have that in case somebody gets injured on our work site that's come from the street, walked off, gets injured, right? We have to have that. So we go to an insurance company to provide us with this different type of insurance requirements that we have for any loss. And that's what insurance is there for. It's there for to safeguard you against any losses. And as a builder, we take it one step further. We're not required by law to insure our tools or our certain, you know, our cars. To some extent, we have to have third party, but we don't have to have comprehensive. We don't have to have home insurance, okay? But we do, because we know that if we don't and something happens, we're going to lose a lot of money. So the ones that we must do by law are things like workers' compensation and public liability. So we have to make sure that we have those insurances in place. And generally, what we do as a builder is we request these things from our subcontractors, okay? We must request to see these insurances and make sure they have them. So we see copies of them, take copies of them, keep them in our files. Because if, let's say you have a worker who gets injured on your site, you're the builder, you've employed a team of painters, and one of them falls off a ladder and he becomes a quadriplegic. Okay, if you don't have the workers' compensation insurance, then the worker who's injured, his lawyer will sue you as the builder. So if his employer, so the painter is working for XYZ Painting, who is his employer, and I as the builder have a contract with XYZ Painting to do my project. If I haven't checked the workers' compensation and that employee gets injured, permanently injured, if his employer doesn't have workers' compensation insurance, then he will be in big trouble, of course. He will be financially in big trouble. However, that worker can then come to me, my company, and say, you allowed this employer to go on your site without having workers' compensation insurance. So now you have to pay, okay? Someone has to pay ultimately. So be very careful in checking the requirements of your subcontractors on site. So this implies any work, it doesn't matter whether it's full-time, part-time, casual. The moment somebody's doing work on your site, on your project, they need to be insured. Okay, and there are different rates. Insurance companies work on risk, so there are different rates. So if I'm actually, let's say I'm an office worker, chances of me getting injured are much less than, let's say, if I'm doing demolition work, okay? So the rate is very different. The amount of money that needs to be paid as a premium to the workers' compensation department needs to be much higher for higher risk. So in construction, the demolition work is the highest rated risk, okay? So if you're doing that work, it's much higher risk than if you're a tiler. So the premium would be much higher, okay? Okay, insurance requirements. So we have things like, these are the different types of insurances that we must have, or we could have, not must have. But firstly, let's talk about HBCF, home warranty insurance. Any work that's done in New South Wales that's over $20,000 worth of value, the person undertaking that work, the builder, must have HBCF insurance, home warranty insurance, okay? And this is not to protect you, but it's to protect the person you're doing the work for. And that is, they have this for 7 years, 6 years, sorry, 6 years now. It used to be, it changes, that's what I'm saying. It used to be 7, now it's 6, okay? It changes all the time. So what that means is you as a builder, if you're going to take on a job, you have to get this HBCF insurance, pay the premium, and when your job finishes after OC, occupation certificate, then the clock starts ticking. And within that 6-year period, if anything goes wrong structurally, you need to come back and fix it. You can't say, oh, I've paid insurance, I've paid this home warranty insurance, I don't need to fix it, somebody else will fix it. No, that insurance is there in case you are no longer in business. You are dead, or you've gone overseas, you've gone back to China, you've gone back to wherever, right? You've skipped the country and you're not coming back. That is what that's there for, to protect the consumer, not to protect you, the builder. So be very cautious of that. So it doesn't mean that, that's why it's very important that you do a good job as a builder, because if something goes wrong, you have to go back and fix it, okay? Now, obviously we have other insurance such as PI, professional indemnity insurance, which is obviously there for people who are providing consulting services. All your engineers, all your architects, they should have these things. However, as a builder, if I'm doing design and construct buildings, I need it because I'm providing the design and building. Therefore, I'm giving people the opportunity to say, well, something's wrong with your design. You didn't design this properly and this doesn't work properly. Therefore, I need professional indemnity insurance. You need public liability insurance, which is a must, right? It's protecting the public because people can come on your site and get injured. And what they call structural defects, builders indemnity insurance, well, that's basically, again, you can insure for anything. If you insure for structural defects that happen, that means that your premiums will be very, very high if you want to protect yourself against something that is not normally protected. We don't normally protect against structural defects, okay? Insurance for loss or damage to property in the course of construction, that is we take that out as contractors all risk insurance, and that is something that we take out to protect any damage that occurs during our construction. Or it might mean if somebody steals our tools, okay, things like that. So again, these insurance policies should be something that you look at very carefully. And remember, there are certain statutory ones, certain ones that are required by law. Make sure you have those as a minimum, and then make sure you have what you need to protect you and your business. Okay? Again, it's important that you get good business advice when you're setting up a business, to run a business, as to what you need. Superannuation is something that is compulsory for us to pay for our employees. I think it's about 9.5%. And as you can see, it's planned to increase this gradually to 12% in 2025. Okay. So that means that on top of the wage you're paying your employees, you have to pay for their superannuation, another added cost. Okay, and the whole idea of superannuation is to try and give people some sort of money for their retirement so the government isn't having to pay a lot more in pensions. Superannuation. Okay, we have this thing called the CCA, or Competition and Consumer Act 2010, which deals with making, trying to protect consumers. Everyone's a consumer. You build a house for somebody, he's a consumer, okay? You buy something from the shop, you are a consumer. So the whole idea is to make it fair, And in building, when can it not be fair? It cannot be fair when I'm trying to rip off, I'm trying to charge too much, I'm taking advantage of people. Often you hear in these current affair programs where tradespeople take advantage of older people. You know, they charge them thousands of dollars for work that shouldn't be done, or for something that costs $100. So this is what this is all about. And also it goes one step further. We need to make sure as builders, we are not getting together with other builders to rip off a client. Let's say a client, we call it the CBA, has decided they want to build a new headquarters, and they ask 10 of us builders to give them pricing. Now, we could all get together and decide, you know what, CBA, we're gonna charge them in our pricing, we're gonna charge a lot more. And we're gonna try and we're gonna charge, everybody's gonna put $100,000 on top of their quote, and then whoever misses out, the other companies can split that money up. Okay, it's like a fee, right? Very illegal things to do, but things like that do happen. So we have to be careful about what this is called collusion. We don't want to be, because it's criminal offense, okay? So as I talked to you about earlier about renewable materials, recycling, environmentally friendly. So we're heading more and more in that direction. If you look at the different things that are available to us these days, materials, and they're always trying to show how more environmentally friendly, low CO2, low carbon, right? It means it's better for the environment. And that's the way the law is heading, to ensure that we do certain things that are going to minimize energy consumption, minimize the damage to the environment. So be aware that we should be looking at those things, because that's the way things are heading. Okay? And they're going to be giving us benefits for doing it, and they're going to be penalizing for us for not doing it. Okay. So what is renewable? Renewable means if we're using a product that can be easily replaced. Okay, so we have timber, solar energy, because timber has grown very quickly. If you sustainable timber, okay, not the trees that they cut in the Amazon, which have been there for hundreds and thousands of years. That grows very slowly. But sustainable timber, which is a lot of the softwood we use, it can be grown very, very quickly. So they're renewable resources. So it means we can get fresh resources. We never run out of these. That's what it basically means. Okay. So that's the idea. Use that. And use low energy materials instead of high energy materials. What does that mean? Low energy means something that is easily converted to a material. So again, timber, wood, right? We cut the tree down. It's easy to convert that into a piece of timber to do a timber frame building. However, steel, aluminium, they have a lot of process to go through. We have to dig the ground, take out the minerals, take them to the factories, convert them, right? Then process them. And then, can you see there's a much bigger process involved? High energy, a lot of energy to create a piece of steel, very little energy to create a piece of timber. Okay, so low energy, versus high energy materials. And processes to ensure compliance with environmental protection legislation. So we have the Environmental Protection Authority in New South Wales that is there to make sure we comply with all this new environmental processes and requirements and law. It's the law. So we have the EPA authority, which will fine us, which as builders, which will, they will look at the noise aspect. If you're making too much noise, you can be fined on your bill. You can, contamination in your land, if you're digging your land and it's contaminated, you have to get it treated. You just can't take it somewhere. You have to take it to a special place. If you're dealing with chemicals, illegal dumping, that happens. People dump asbestos in the middle of a street or a park or something. Okay, so it's something that we need to make sure doesn't happen. And this is the people, they are the police of the environment, if you want to put it that way. How we do it, where we recycle our waste, how we should be recycling our waste. So they have a large scope, and often we hear about EPA, Environmental Protection Authority. So they are the regulators for the Act, okay, which is the Environmental Protection Act, okay? So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you about today.